You go to a store, you see an item you like, and you begin your talk. It's permissible to have some type of negotiation while your mind is not clear if you have even intent to buy it. Halachically speaking, the idea of entering the negotiation, you have to have a good faith. The problem is how far you go with a good faith. Trace a simple example. You go before the Sukkot holiday, the lulavim market, and you want to pick a proper lulav. Meanwhile, it may turn that you damage while you're looking. It can be in many endeavor of items. So this is one component of our discussion. Another one is if you're buying something as a gift, engagement gift. Let's say a person is about to engage and he sent his soon-to-be in-laws a gift, but it may turn that they rejected that, and then it wasn't even a matter of purchasing. Is that permissible, or it has to be a clear statement, and how far you go with that? Another subject we're going to discuss today, Mitzvah Hashem, is the value of mitzvat milah, the mitzvah of the brit, the circumcision, the sources. But we start on page 31, Tractate Nedarim. It's a subject that we continue in the language of Nedarim. Excuse me. In general, we said when it's come to a matter of vow, halech achar leshon bnei adam. You go by the language that people expresses. So we have here hanoder mishovtei Shabbat. If someone expresses a manner of vows, prohibited benefit from those who have the holy day of Shabbat as a day of rest, asur b'Yisrael ve'asur b'chutim. He is prohibited from both, from the regular fellow Jew, but also from the kutim, the kutins. Kutim, or the Samaritans, it's a big question, is a disputation if it's considering gerei emet, a true convert, or not. There is a notion that it's yes, there are those who say no. The problem with them is they accepted some but not all of the mitzvot. For example, the pilgrims, aliyah laregel, they did not observe. They go by the Har Grizim, the place they have in Samaria. So since they accepted some but not all of the mitzvot, not everyone agreed that you go by them. They, the origination of that group is in the time of the Assyrian king named Sanherib, when he exiled our people. So it was the 10 tribes that were exiled, and then it was this tribe, the Kutais, that they have these lions that came and eat them, etc. And then, excuse me, out of fear, they converted. So one of the issues we have that's based on the book of Kings, second book of Kings, chapter 17, when you're dealing with conversion and the people are not clearly sincere about their conversion, how far you go. Me'ochlei shum, Ezra, the scribe, put a decree that in order to fulfill the mitzvah of fruitful and multiply, the man should eat garlic on Friday night, and that notion the Kutais also observes. So since they have this idea, it's again a question how far you go with that. You read more on that in Tractate Bava Kama, page 82. So they said asur b'Yisrael ve'asur b'chutim, as we said, because they both accepted that. They followed that decree. Me'olei Yerushalayim, Asur b'Yisrael, for those who fulfill the mitzvah of pilgrim, the 3 festivals. So he basically prohibited from the fellow Jew. Mutar bechutim, as we said earlier, since they do not fulfill that mitzvah of the pilgrims. So even the Torah said it clearly, both in the book of Shmot, chapter 16, and in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 16. Since the Kutim, the Kutais, the Rosh explains, did not fulfill that obligation, and they chose to do it in the Mount Gerizim. That's, you see more on that on Tractate Chulin, page 6. So therefore, you go by this way. It's a story about the stipler, the great Rabbi Kanievsky. I have the privilege to know him for a long time. So someone came and asked him a question about that issue, being fruitful. He wants to have a sgula, he wants to have those type of amulet. And the stipler said, why you need to go so far? We have here in the Tractate Nedarim, page 31, a clear statement that the garlic, the shum, is a sgula. So why you need to lechapes sgulot chadashot? Why you need to search for something that we already have a clear manner of a inscription in the Talmud? The Gemara now elaborate on the Mishnah and said, "Mai shovtei Shabbat." What do you mean by making this vow from those who rest on the holiday of Shabbat? You have to say, "Mimekaimei Shabbat." For all of those who was, how do you call this group of people who observe Shabbat but they're not Jewish? I forgot that group.
Oh, the Seventh Day Adventists.
Thank you. So anyway, my area, bechutim, afilu ovdei kochavim nami. So you have to differentiate between those who are mechuyavim, where the obligation, those who not. The truth is, we said, goy sheshavat chayav mita. It's not so. Ela mimetzuvim ala Shabbat, those who are commanded to observe Shabbat, not idol worshippers. Yachei eima seifa, me'olei Yerushalayim asur b'Yisrael u'mutar bechutim. Those who are sent to Yerushalayim is forbidden, not from the Kutens. So they said, Amai v'hametzuvim minhu. So they have this idea, this mitzvah of pilgrim to Yerushalayim, like everyone, every fellow Jew. Amar Rabbi metzuve ve'oseh katane, which means those who fulfill betartei bavei kamaita. We are dealing here with 2 parts of the Mishnah, which is, one is the vow from the Shovtei Shabbat, and one is a vow me'ochlei shum. Israel vechutim mitzuvim beosim, because they are part of the vow. Of the kochavim, those who idol worshippers, hahu de'avdei veosim ve'enam mitzuvim. They are those who does that, but they are not commanded, so they are not part of that vow. Be'olei Yerushalayim, Israel mitzuvim veosim, kutim mitzuvim ve'enam osim. We are commanded, and we're doing that. The Kutim, even they are obligated to do the pilgrim to Yerushalayim, not fulfill their obligation. Therefore, they are not part of the Neder. So again, there are 2 points. One is the great Rabbi Schlesinger, who bring in his book a lot of sources that even in nowadays, when we do not have an active Beit HaMikdash, there's still a mitzvah of Aliyah LaRegel, according to his view. Also, we have to remember when he speaks about those like the Kutim, that they accepted some of the mitzvot but not all the mitzvot. We have in general a category that is called Mumar leTe'avon and Mumar le'achis. Mumar le'achis is someone who rebel against the Torah, and he does that on purpose. There are those who does that just because they have those desire, but it's not because they're rebelling. It's 2 different categories. So for example, doesn't make it right, but someone said, I eat sometimes by a non-kosher place, but I eat only vegetables, and I eat only fish, or whatever it is, and it's because there's no kosher place in my city. So it doesn't make it right, but that's its leteavon, for his desire. Is not that he does that in order to anger Hashem. Versus the worst level, which is someone who does that to get even on purpose, to eat on Yom Kippur, on purpose to eat non-kosher, on purpose to take the mezuzah and make a copy and put a copy of mezuzah, etc., etc. People like that, that's mumar lehachis, that's worst. It's a story about one of the Hasidic rabbis, I don't want to mention his name. In a past generation, he walked out of his house of worship on Yom Kippur in New York City, and he saw a fellow Jew who eats on Yom Kippur. So the Rebbe walked in that non-kosher place with a few assistants, and he said to him in Yiddish, he says, like in English is bon appetit, you should enjoy the food. And the guy was shocked, and he said, thank you. He says, bon appetit, he repeated a few times, and he walked out. So the Hasidim, the followers, were amazed, what's going on? And the Rebbe explained, and he said, look, you see someone who's sinned, at least you wish that he does that because he cannot control his desire. He wants to eat. But it's not because he's lachis that he does that in order to anger Hashem, which is worst. Konam she'eni ne'eneh livnei Noach. The next Mishnah say that if one says konam, that I will not benefit from the descendants of Noach. So the idea is, here they use the word livnei Noach. It's like Michel from Mutar בישראל ואסור בעובדי כוכבים. Why? Because when you have these categories of Noah who are obligated by the 7 Noahide laws, it's applied to them in particular. וישראל מנפיק מכלל בני נוח, you mean to say that we are out? We are. So they said, כיוון דיקדש אברהם, because our forefather Abraham was singled out by God from the rest of the people, itkreu al shmei, so therefore we call as a descendants of Abraham. They said, the Rosh quoted Isaiah 41 that said, Zera Abraham Ohavi, the descendants of Abraham, my beloved, and not Noach. That's the way we said in doing our Amida prayer, Magen Abraham, shield of Abraham, not shield Noach. So it's a discussion among the poskim when it's come to someone who's meshumad, who's basically a apostate, you said, that someone who's used to be a fellow Jew and he basically converted to some. So how you treated him as a kebnei Noach or not? Another discussion among the rabbis, derivative from that, is the question of a blind person. There is a book called Minchat Chinuch. Minchat Chinuch asks a question, God forbid, someone who was blind, how you treated him in a matter of mitzvot. Did he have obligation the same as descendants of Noach or not? Especially if he was born blind. So in general, you have a process of graduation, and when the boy reached bar mitzvah, for example, so he is now son of the commandment, commit himself to follow the commandment. How you treated blind person. The Minchat Chinuch elaborates based on this Gemara. She'eni ne'ena lezera Abraham. The Mishnah said that if someone prohibited himself, that I will not benefit like the descendants of offspring of Abraham. So it means, he said, the estate, the property of the descendants of Abraham is forbidden to me. So we should know first, when we speak about descendants of Abraham, descendants of Noah, we talk about spiritual descendancy. But anyway, here they said, Asur biYisrael umotar beumot haolam. So he is prohibited from derivative, since he said that they should not have a benefit from a descendants of Abraham, forbidden from deriving benefit from a fellow Jew, but permitted bimot haolam, from other nation of the world, as the Rosh and the one said that it's not considering the yichus, the lineage, not go by the Abraham. So the Gemara asks, wait a second, Vayika Yishmael. Yishmael is descendants also of Abraham. So the Gemara said, Ki beyitzchak yikare lecha zara. The Torah said in Bereshit, in Genesis 21, that God said to Abraham that you descendants will follow toward Isaac and not from Yishmael. Those who are familiar with literature of the Quran, or the literature of the Mu'tazila, which is the literature of the Islam, they basically hold that the Kaaba, the place in Mecca that they worship, and they say that a person needs to visit at least once in his life and circle around the Kaaba, etc., and you will call it Hajj. It's a big honor. They hold that the circumcision was to Ishmael, not to Isaac, which again, it's very fascinating to think. What?
The Akedah or the circumcision?
They hold that the whole event happened to Ishmael.
Right.
The whole,
because Ishmael was, we hold also that Ishmael was circumcised, right?
Yes, but the difference is the age of 13.
Right.
Anyway.
Yep.
Vayika Esav. The Gemara said you have Esav. It's also son of Yitzchak. So why you don't call the descendants of Esau the descendants of Abraham? So the Gemara said Beyitzchak velo kol Yitzchak, which means if you go by the Hebrew, excuse me, or you use the word be, which go to the specification, be Yitzchak, the part of the descendants of Isaac. There is a question when in literature of Rosh Hashanah, if you look at the prayer in the Musaf, in the additional prayer of Rosh Hashanah, we mentioned the zchut, the privilege, the merit of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And then he said, Lezar'o, the descendants of Yaakov, berachamim tizko, you should remember with compassion. Why? So there are those who do not have this line in the prayer book. There's a story about the late Satmar Rebbe. Someone, a fellow, was not religious, said to him, I'm also a descendants of those. And he said to him, you know, when you speak about descendants of Abraham, it's okay to say, but can you prove from which one of his wife, of Abraham's wives, you came from? You cannot prove it. And he meant to say the way you behave, it's bringing those questions, because Abraham, as you know, have more than one wife, and therefore there are more than one direction, and that's the meaning Be Yitzchak, those who follow the path of Yitzchak, the son of Sarah and Abraham, and not the others. She'ini neineh mi-Yisrael. If someone said konam, that I not benefit from Israel, which means he basically put a prohibition for himself to benefit from any fellow Jew. So therefore, they said, lokeach biyoter u'mocher bepachot. This is fascinating, because you basically can have a transactions matter with a fellow Jew, but you have to find a proper customer, which is you need to convince someone that you're buying it for more than the asking price and selling for more than selling price. So in that sense, you do not derive benefit from a fellow Jew, because when you have a matter of transactions, that's part of the framework of your vow. שישראל נהנים לי, לוקח בפחות ומוכר ביותר. The same, the other way around. ואין שומעים לו. But people should not listen to lose money by dealing with this fellow. שאיני נהנה להן והן לי. So he prohibited himself to derive benefit from a fellow Jew, and he also prohibited them to derive benefit from him. יהנה לו עובדי כוכבים. So he allowed to do only with a idol worshipper. And the Ran elaborates on that, how you can do that. The Ran said in conclusion, for example, if asar chefetz, if he's prohibited a specific item, chefza, not gavra, so is no solution. The chefetz asur alav, is prohibited in that chefetz. Amar Shmuel, halokech kli min haoman levakro. Here we're dealing with the situation that the person have an inspection. He takes from a seller, from a craftsman, an item, and he wanted to inspect them. Vene'enas biyado chayav. So imagine you're taking a lulav before Sukkot. You're checking a different lulavim. Good morning. You're checking a different lulavim, and one of them you messed up. So if you go to a Giant or Savoy store and you lift up an item and all of a sudden, boom, it's broken. Usually they let it go, right? Right, usually, in my experiences. But especially here they use about ne'enas, that the mishap occurred, it is possession but unintentional. So here we said chayav, he is liable to pay, because you treat it like a shoel. If you remember, we have 4 categories of guardians, and shoel, he is responsible even that is beyond his control. Alma kasavar anat lokeachi. You mean to say that Shmuel maintains that the sale is the benefit for the buyer. תנן, שאיני נהנה מישראל מוכר בפחות, אבל שווה בשווה לא, והנעת לוקח היא אפילו שווה בשווה. So the Gemara said, מתנידין בזבינה דרמי על הפה, which is, he is happy to get rid of item. You know, sometimes in those short sales or big sales, you have a situation that the seller is stuck with certain things and he cannot get over how quickly he can get rid of certain properties, and therefore, if you have a hard time to sell it, or it's a trouble item, etc., etc., so whenever he gets rid of that, he is very happy. So again, here you have to differentiate between something that's called meka harif, which means that it's easy sell an item, and if you are selling of merchandise, you know always you have certain items that it's easy for you to get rid of or easy for you to sell, and you have items that you know that it's a hard stocks or hard merchandise that's hard to sell. Im ken im hareisha, lokeach biyoter, so it's not, you take it in the right market price, so it's not derive any joy, any benefit for the purchaser. ועוד עם הסיפה שישראל נהנים לי לוקח בפחות ומוכר ביותר, והיא בזבינה דרמי על הפה, if you talk in a situation that you sell it by the merchandise that is a low demand, אפילו שווה בשווה, so even that it's its value. So Gemara says, Seifa bezvina charifa. The last part of the Mishnah dealing with the merchandise that they have a high demand. So you sell it quickly. Many customers running to buy it. So therefore, it's always considering selling the driving benefit for the purchaser only if you sell it more than its market value. If that's the case, the vow buy at less even the price of its value. Ella, the Gemara said rather, 31. Bi matnitin bizvina mitzah udeshmuel bizvina charifa. The Mishnah dealing with average sales, which is neither of particularly low quality nor particularly high quality and high demand. And Shmuel dealing with merchandise that they have a heidimen. So the Or Sameach asks a question. We live in a generation that have a shefa, that is abundance market. It's not like the Talmudic time. So many times you have more derivative, more joy from sell, how you treat it. There is a book called Mishpatecha LeYaakov. He asks a question. Lulav is a good example. You check it in the market, and all of a sudden it's ruined. It's not the same condition, meaning it's still kosher, but it's not the same high quality it was before. Because as you know, you're buying lavdil, you're buying a car, so you have a different price for the showroom of car that is in a showroom versus car that no one touched, right? So you treat it as bina harifa, or it's a heidimen or not. So he brought, the Mishpatecha LeYaakov brought the Ktsot HaChoshen that said that when it's come to lulav, we have the concept of mitzvot lav le'not nitmu. The mitzvot was not given to drive benefits, so therefore he's not obligated to pay. Tanya Kvatei de Shmuel, הלוקח כלים מן התגר לשגרם לבית חמים. Here is another case that someone is engaged and he wants to give a gift to his soon-to-be in-laws. So that's based in Gemarrah and Bava Metzia, page 81. Now the problem is, you go to a merchant, you buy for example, expensive stuff, right? And you send it to them. But the question is, it may happen that they rejected that. So you bother this salesperson or this owner of a store, and it may turn that the item will be returned. So they said, ואמר לו, אם מקבלים אותם ממני, אני נותן לך דמם, ואם לאו, אני נותן לך לפי טובת הנאה שהם. If they accepted my gift, the in-laws, it's fine. If not, I'll buy them and pay you their full price. So the ne'ensu ba'alicha, if the utensils were unavoidably destroyed on the way, so chayav, he needs to pay the seller the full price. B'chazara, if it's after he showed them and bring it back, so he's not obligated the full price. מפני שהוא כנושא שכר. You treat it as someone who's a guardian and get paid to be guardian. So he's no longer in the category of borrower, of shoel, but נושא שכר. So therefore, you're not obligated in the case of honest, that is beyond control. Story, Hahu Safsira, it was a good morning. How are you? We missed you yesterday. Anyway, so it's a story about the certain middleman. The shakal chamara lezabunei, that he purchased, and that's in those days, but you can have an application nowadays. He purchased a donkey from his fellow in order to sell it. Velo izban. So he put it in the market, he tried to sell it, he couldn't sell it, so he bring it back, right? Bahade Adar itnis chamara. On the way back, something happened to the donkey, he lost its values. Chayavei Rav Nachman leshalumei. Rav Nachman was the one who was the head of the rabbinic court. He asked the person to pay for that. There is many questions in practical halacha. For example, you have a fellow that he has samples, right? He is representative of several companies. He goes to different stores and he shows samples, okay? And you have many samples from different companies, okay? Now, all of a sudden, at night, somebody break in his car and stole samples. So, do you treat it as vina harifa or not? How you treated him? Is he obligated to pay or not? It's based on this Gemara. It's a big discussion among the rabbis. אמר לי, חזרה לספסירה הולכי, דאילו משכח לזבוני אפילו הבבא דביתי, מי לא מזבין לי. He says the return trip of the middleman is like bringing there of the son-in-law. So why? Because he said, even though even at the door of the house, would he not sell it? So again, you have here a situation that is called a borrower, and therefore you treated as these cells is nullified. Because think about it, for example, in the in-law situation, if the family of soon-to-be in-law did not accept his gift, so it's basically the whole manner of sale is not effective. So you don't have this responsibility of a borrower. You remember we said, based on Gemarrah Rabbi Weisblum, we have 4 different categories. One of them is a borrower, which is different than the guardian that get paid. So as long as he acquires with his donkey, it may be a potential to sell. But if he has a different direction now, it's called ana'at lokech, it's different treatment. So as we said, for you just walk in. We took the last example, which is a practical halachot. You have people that are salespeople, but experienced salespeople. So a guy, he has samples. You go to different stores and you show samples from different companies of products. And someone broke in during the night and stole these items. Is he obligated to pay their values of those samples to those companies or not? Because based on this Gemara, it's not so simple, right? Because he's basically an emissary to those companies to show, but it's expensive, it's just a sample, but it's expensive samples, right?
In a situation like that, if you have a store and somebody break in and steal, they will say the sample, usually company won't charge you for the sample because just a sample too.
Okay, so it's each case is different, but you should know it's a special tractate. Tractate Baba Metzia, which I'm going to study. The Gemara divided between 4 categories, which is a big subject. 4 categories, meaning, for example, you have a salesperson, and now how far those companies have the trust in you. Those companies going after you to pay them back, those companies give you another chance, those companies going to fire you and want the money for that item. One of the things is, how far is your responsibility? If you put it in a safe, lock safe and security doors, is that done? So for example, if a fellow asks his neighbor, which happened in Jerusalem, just to give you an example, he knocked the door of his neighbor and he said, it's Friday, I need to pick up the children from the school and I'm baking something in my kitchen. Just go over and turn off the oven or reduce the oven. And the neighbor said, fine. And he came back, it's a big fire, right? So you do obligate the neighbor. He wasn't responsible in the sense of money, he didn't get paid. You ask him for a favor, etc. So it's one category, it's called shomer chinam, someone who does that for free. Shomer sachar, that guardian that get paid. Someone who's a borrower, or someone who get paid for being borrower. It's 4 different categories, and it's a big tractate that dealing with that. In very general, each case is different. If you treat it, for example, as a borrower, is like we said, it's just one way. Meaning, after you present the stuff in the market and you're about to return that item, you have a different responsibility than when you are going and show this sample. The Mishnah said, Konam she'ani nehene la'arelim, we're running out of time. מותר בערלי ישראל ואסור במולי עובדי כוכבים. Let me read quickly and then explain. שאני נהנה למולים, אסור בערלי ישראל, מותר במולי עובדי כוכבים. שאין העולה קרויה אלא לשם עובד כוכבים, שנאמר, כי כל הגויים ערלים וכל בית ישראל ערלי לב. ואומר, וירא פלישתי הערל הזה. ואומר, פן ישמח למדות פלישתים, פן לעוז למדות הערלים. רבי אלעזר בן עזריה אומר, מאוסי הערלה שנתגנו ברשעים, שנאמר, כי כל הגויים ערלים. So the second part of the Mishnah dealing with the mitzvah of Brit Milah, Rabbi Yishmael אומר גדולה מילה שנחרטו עליה 13 ביתות. Since we talk about the Brit, so we talk about the Milah, and we say that is the 13th covenant made in regards to Brit Milah, and that's based on the book of Genesis, Bereshit, chapter 17. The truth is, the rabbi said, Tosfot Yom Tov and others, that it's not clearly connected to Brit Milah. It's written 13 times the word covenant, but some of them applies to other manners. Torah and others, but there are those who say that applied to the brit, the circumcision of the soul, or the subjugation of the soul to God. Again, wish to have more time on this. Anyway, Rabbi Yossi אומר גדולה מילה שהיא דוחה את השבת החמורה, that if the 8 days, the time of the brit occurred on Shabbat, that override the mitzvah of not violate Shabbat. You allow for the brit milah to carry the materials or to perform the brit milah, because the Torah said in Leviticus 12 that this has to be specifically at the 8 days, and that's what we study in Tractate Shabbat, page 131. רבי נחמיה אומר גדולה מילה שדוחה את הנגעים. We have this mitzvah of negaim. Negaim, it's the leprosy. The Torah elaborates on Leviticus 12. So they said when it happens that someone have that on this foreskin, you baby, you make the brit, the baby, even this part will cut. And the Maharsha elaborates on that. רבי אומר גדולה מילה שעל כל המצוות שעשה אברהם אבינו לא נקרא שלם על שמל, that the Abraham, our forefather, not called complete until he performed the Brit Milah. שנאמר, they said in Bereshit, in Genesis 17, התהלך לפניי והיה תמים. They said that God said, walk before me and be complete. Be complete is only after you have the Brit Milah, you considering a complete, someone who total subservient to God, that subjugate himself. If you think about it, Abraham did it at his 90s, and it was without anesthesia, right? And it's the excruciating pain and the involvement was unbearable. So anyway, the Rambam said it's a big question about Bnei Keturah. Bnei Keturah is the descendants of Keturah, which according to some was Hagar. So the descendant like the Yishmael descendants, they also have the Brit Milah. So therefore, the question is, when we come to our discussion of deriving benefit from the Arelim, etc., how that treated. The Mishnah Lamelech, the Shagat Aryeh, asked the question, why are you allowed to derive benefit from them if they are not considering Arelim? So they explain in very short, because running out of time, there is a difference between Pri'ah and Milah. You have the Brit and you have the Pri'ah, the other part of the foreskin and the completion that we do in our orthodox way of the Brit Milah. And that's something that they do not do. So therefore, the Shagat Aryeh explained, that's the idea that when it's come to Arelim, it's also included Ishmaelim. Another option, the Shagat Aryeh said, when it's come to matter of vow, we said at the beginning, Olchim achre leshon bnei adam. You go by the language of the way that people use, and since in our days we are not sure who are the Bnei Keturah, if this, the descendants of Yishmael in the ancient time, is really the Bnei Keturah that we're considering today. So since that, we go by the language that people use, and people are meant to say in general Arelim, and that's the reason. The Baruch Gdola Milah Shel Malei, he, if did not fulfill the obligation of the Brit Milah, Lo bara HaKadosh Baruch Hu et olamo. That's a very deep concept, that God in a way did not create the world. שנאמר, they said in Jeremiah 33, כה אמר השם אם לא בריתי יומם ולילה חוקות שמיים בארץ לא שמתי. That in a way God said that without the covenant of the Brit Milah, I will not appointed the ordinance of the heaven and earth. That and the covenant that exists day and night is the covenant of the circumcision, as it's always found on the person's body. Even some rabbis like Tosfot Yom Tov and others ask, that statement apply on Torah, not to the Brit, but their answer and says that the Brit is part of the Torah. There are other explanations we elaborate in the next shiur.
ויחם לשולוים מלאכי השולוים מלאכי